Hey there, Emmanuel here from WebDevFuel, and in this video we'll go over the brand new feature of Claude Code, which is sub-agents, but in a different way. So previously we were able to spawn sub-agents by telling a agent itself to spawn a subtask or spawn a sub-agent to do something, and then it would basically give a task to a sub-agent and allow that sub-agent to have its own context, to have its own let's say corner of the world doing things, and then that context would the first cool thing, at least for me, is that the context wouldn't be polluted when it comes to the main agent. And then we could simply give small tasks to sub agents, and then the main agent would coordinate between them and just extract the most important information from the sub agents. Like it says here, we can create a new specialized AI sub agents in Claude Code for task specific workflows and improve context management. And this is the new thing here, is that we now, with the /agents command, which we'll take a look at in just a second, can create and manage agents which have their own personalities, their own pre-created prompts, and will be used in certain situations automatically. And this is the cool thing about this. So here it says that custom sub-agents in Claude Code are specialized AI assistants that can be invoked to handle specific types of tasks. So the cool thing here is that instead of having one main agent, let's say, do a bunch of different things and have a bunch of different stuff that it needs to change inside the code base, it's much simpler to have sub agents that are tasked with very specific things. So let's say you want to, for example, create a website. You, for example, can create a sub agent that takes care of creating the UI design, then a sub agent that takes care of preparing the implementation with Next.js, another agent that takes a look at the security vulnerabilities, and finally, for example, a sub agent to um, try and test all of the user experience using something like, for example, playwright at the end to ensure that everything works correctly, take screenshots and see how things work. So by having these different sub agents, not only does it make it easier for us to create workflows. So instead of you saying to an AI coding agent, I want you to create this site, you can tell it, okay, I want you to first of all take a look at the design, then the design sub-agent already knows which tools to use, which kinds of things it needs to do, which again we'll take a look at in just a second. Instead of again just doing that in one prompt and having that one agent have to sort of let's say keep in mind, which is a human way of referring to it. So instead of that one agent needing to keep in mind everything, it can give tasks to sub agents. So let's skip over all of these things. So it says here that the key benefits are context preservation, like I said, specialized expertise, reusability. So once created, the sub-agents can be used across different projects. Very cool. And also flexible permissions, which I haven't honestly played around with very much. I can actually do that while we are recording this, but we are able to give different permissions to sub-agents to ensure that certain subagents are not able to, for example, write files or execute commands or execute certain types of commands to create like a better boundary with the subagent. So when, for example, one subagent could be like the debugger, and if we want to give that sub-agent the ability to debug our code, we might not even want that sub-agent to edit files at all. So the debugger can only look at the code and say, okay, I think this is where things are happening, this is where things are happening. And if you use Claude Code, most likely it already happened to you, which is something that happened to me a lot of times, and it is very frustrating. And that is, you ask the AI, okay, I want you to debug this thing, and then the AI starts editing code. So you have to always tell it, okay, do not change anything, please. With these subagents, we could pre-create this prompt for the subagent to tell it, okay, you are not to edit any kind of code. And besides this, we can also never give it the permission to edit files. Then we have here the quick start, which tells us that we need to run the /agents command, how to create commands, and all those kinds of things. So let's hop into the terminal so that we can see how to use this. We'll be using this in a project that I'm building. which essentially looks at Tailwind CSS classes, not only with the help of a CLI, but also with the help of an MCP server. It basically looks inside of a Tailwind CSS project and looks for classes which are invalid, which are classes that are not valid. The reason that I built this recently is because I've been using Claude Code to build websites, in this case, a particular website for a client. And I stumbled upon the problem that the coding agents, even with Contact 7 or with access to the web for documentation, sometimes would use classes from Tailwind CSS version 3, and I'm using version 4, so I decided to create this to simplify the process of simply telling the LLM, okay, I want you to, after changing everything, I want you to always like verify if the classes inside the project are valid, and if they are not, it can know, okay, this is not a valid Tailwind CSS class because we haven't defined it inside of our globals.css file, or because it is not a valid class at all, and then adjust based on that. With this said, this is the project that I want to like add a couple of features to see how these agents work. So let's first of all see how it works overall. I have here the like basically the project, and then I'm going to pop here a new window, and I want to see exactly how to basically like first of all we want to run here npm run build. This is going to build, and then we want to do here node, and we want to say here dist, and inside of this we have the CLI .js file. Now if we run this, we are going to get this thing here, and the project that we're going to use to analyze the code base with Tailwind CSS is this one, Robot, which is a brand new like Next.js website that I've just created, and it's fresh. It doesn't have any kind of errors. So if we pass here the correct path, so this should be the path to the styles. So this needs to be here code. Then the project is Robot, and if I see here, we have the source, then the app, and globals.css. So I can see here source, app, and then globals.css. Then we want to say here that we want this to be returned as JSON. And then we also should have a way to pass, okay, so here the final argument is going to be the like the files that we want to take a look at. And since this project under the hood is using the Tailwind CSS like Rust code, not really the Rust code, but it imports like the Rust functions, we can use like the same patterns that like Tailwind CSS allows us to pass. So we can say here code, then robot, and then we can say here source, and we pass here this glob. So in this case, we only want TSX. We could also do something like GSX and TSX to look for both of those things. And if you want to take a look at this project, like I said, this is a open source project that I've built with this code in mind, and I'm going to leave a link in the description down below so you can take a look at it if you find this helpful. But now when we run this, as you can see, we have here the number of valid classes, the invalid classes, which are 0. If I hop back into this code base, and now we go, for example, to the page.tsx, and we make here a mistake, let's say that the LLM would add something like 2p's and then 20 to represent like the padding, and if we do here, for example, I'm doing like space and then k, in this case actually shift and k, to be able to see this. I don't see any kind of hints, so it says here no information available. This means that the class is incorrect. So now if I rerun this, now we find here the invalid class. So this is like a just a prelude so that you know exactly what we are working with. Now we can hop into Claude, and I like to say here dangerously. I really hope that this is correctly typed. Skip permissions, or actually let's just do here a help because I'm not really sure if I'm typing that correctly. It's very long, so okay, I'm just going to copy this and instead paste this here. So now Claude is going to start, and we are inside of this project. So, for example, I want to build a new feature into this that allows me to know, let's say, the amount of um, times that we create a new or that we find a class. So let's say that I want to, inside of this project, know the amount of times that we, for example, have, let's before all of that, delete this, the amount of times that I'm using, for example, a background, let's say background black, or actually font mono. Okay, so I want to know something like how many times is the font mono actually available inside of this project. So I'm going to expand this really quickly. I think it's like this. Okay, so now let's create a couple of agents, and I want agents to not to actually implement this feature, but rather I want agents to be able to take care of different parts of this. So first of all, I think that actually a cool thing would be to take a look at the code base and see exactly what it's doing. So maybe we want one agent that is a MCP server like expert. So we say here /agents, and it says here no agents found, create specialized subagents that Claude can delegate to. Each subagent has its own context window, custom system prompt, and specific tools. Try creating code reviewer, code simplifier, security reviewer, like I've said previously, tech lead, or UX reviewer. So now we want to create this inside this project. If you want to have sort of like a more generic agent that is going to be available in all your projects, then you want to use here personal, which will add here to your home directory and then to .claude. If not, we can use this inside of the project. I'm going to choose the first option, which is the project one, and this will create this inside of this directory. So now we have two different options here. We can create this with Claude, which is the recommended way. We give sort of like a description of what we want this agent to do, and then Claude knows exactly how to build the agent template correctly, or we can do the manual configuration. I'm going to go with this one since it is the recommended, and I'm going to skip over the manual configuration. So now here I want to say something that describes what this agent should do and when it should do and when it should be used. So we should be comprehensive for best result. So an example is expert software engineer that helps review my code based on best practices. So like I said, I want first of all a MCP server expert. So I'm going to say here expert software engineer with the sole focus on MCP clients and servers, the MCP spec, and the MCP, let's say, API or SDKs. Or in this case, we can say the Python SDK, since this is built, if I'm not mistaken, with Python. The agent should, when necessary, use contact 7 to look at the MCP specs, contact 7, or search. Okay, so I'm not able to go back, contact 7 or web search to look at the MCP specs. And now what will happen is that this part of the instruction is going to be given to the agent each time that we ask this to be used. So we can simply say, okay, we have a problem with this MCP server. I want you to delegate this to the MCP. This is going to give it a name, but we can just like be generic about it. We can say like the MCP expert agent or something like that. And when this gets like sent to this agent, so we will have like a sub agent running, a sub task. At that point, all of these contexts will be given to it, and we don't need to repeat this over and over again. We don't need to tell it to use context 7 over and over again. It knows what to do based on this description. We also have here a test server, so maybe I'm going to skip over this, but you could also say, okay, this sub agent or this agent should always run tests when completing its work, but I'm going to leave this as is. So now let's run this. It is generating the agent configuration, and we need to wait a little bit since this is using Claude itself to generate our agent configuration. The cool thing about this is that Anthropic already knows what makes a good prompt when it comes to like the structure of it and all those things. We'll take a look at that in just a second. But instead of us having to do all of this manually, it is much easier to give this here to the agent. So now it was created, and we have here the tools that we wanted to use. In this case, this is more of a generic like agent. We could also show here the individual ones. So we have here the task, the bash, the glob, the grep. So I want to allow it to use all of these things. If it wants to like enter plan, exit plan mode, or write to dos, or all those kinds of things, it can use those. So I'm going to actually just leave this as is and not really focus on this specificity. But the idea here is very simple. So uh, basically we can allow all of the tools, read only tools, edit tools, execution tools, and MCP and other tools. So in this case, if we wanted to have this sub agent only work on something that would be like debugging, I've said this at the beginning of the video, we would remove here the edit, the multi-edit, the write, yeah, and basically this. And like it could still write obviously stuff through bash, but maybe we could also like remove the bash, and then it would not have that ability anymore, only leave it with like for example the read and maybe the grep and the glob, and it will be able to do its work. But let's here hide the individual tools and continue with all of them. Now we can give this a color which is going to be used when this is running. Let's give this green. And now we have here a couple of things. The final step is to confirm and save. This is called the mod MCP protocol expert. Um, yeah, I think this is fine. The description is this one. Use this agent when you need expert guidance on model context protocol implementation, including client-server development, protocol specification, or Python SDK usage. This agent specializes in MCP architecture. And then there is the rest of the prompt. We also have here this system prompt itself that it creates. You are an expert software engineer, exclusively specializing in model context protocol. Your deep expertise and I don't know how to say this, so I'm going to skip over it. MCP client and server implementation, the complete MCP specs, and the official MCP Python SDK. There are a couple of warnings. Description is very long, over 400 characters, that's fine. And then the agent has access to all tools. So we're going to press enter to confirm. And now we have our first one. So now if I think about this feature that I want to build, I might want to build, for example, so now we have this part of our like agents that takes care of this. So now the other one might be a agent that is specialized in Tailwind CSS. So now let's create again this inside the project, generate in the same way. So now you are an expert software engineer that the sole focus is to Tailwind CSS from the user and the implementer perspective. Uh, your expertise lies in knowing how Tailwind CSS is written with Rust under the hood and which APIs get exposed to TypeScript. You will focus on implementing new features inside the ts.ts files by using, when possible, the Tailwind CSS TypeScript APIs. If you need, you should use context 7 or the GitHub API to fetch the Tailwind CSS documentation or code base. So the reason for this is because we are building this like plugin or extension for Tailwind CSS. It is not really a plugin, but it should know how the code base works so that we know, okay, I want to like import this function that is not even mentioned in the documentation sometimes. So it needs to be able to take a look at the code base. Alternatively, you can look at this path to see the Tailwind CSS code base. And I'm going to say here code and then Tailwind CSS. And I think that's where it lives inside of my computer here. So I've cloned basically the Tailwind CSS code here, which includes like the grades and also the packages with Node. And maybe, okay, I'm going to leave this as is. So now let's generate this one. It is generating. And while this does its thing, we've already saw how this worked previously. So now let's take a look at this code and continue seeing, okay, so maybe a CLI like expert would be something too much to focus. So we have here the context aware options. We have the CLI that takes all the things and then scans the files and all those things. And then we also have here the tests. Yeah, so I think like both of these agents are more than good enough for us to try and implement a new feature. So let's also accept here everything. We'll do this one as blue and then accept it. So now we can exit. I think the agents are already available. Just to make sure, I'm going to like exit and enter this again and clear this. So now let's see what we want to build and try to explain that to it. So I'm going to see here to say here, let's implement a new feature in this tdub lint code base. The code base is a CLI that parses Tailwind CSS projects and or files and finds invalid Tailwind CSS classes. I want to expand the feature set by adding a tool call or a CLI, let's say, argument. So this actually could be something like, for example, a new keyword altogether, a new CLI subcommand, which will be split from the one we currently have. So instead of doing node path to file.js and then, for example, path to be able to call to see the invalid classes, we want to have path to file.js invalid classes and path to file.js. So the new feature that we want to create is count classes. The new feature will be the count classes, which will look at the file and count how many times we find a class inside a project. We'll pass also the directory or a file, and as the last argument we can pass for example or actually we can pass like we will also pass the CSS file as a flag, all the other flags like JSON, and a new flag that takes in the class that we want to look at. Okay, so with all of this said, now we want to tell it what to do with the subagents. I want you to use the Tailwind CSS expert agent, or to ask to implement the Tailwind CSS slash CLI part of it. And then when that's ready and working correctly, I want you to use the MCP spec expert to also add a new call tool, like for example, count classes to the MCP server. Okay, so I think this is everything that we need to tell it. Also, an additional context would be you can use this project path as a testing ground when trying the CLI. And we want to say here code and then robot. Okay, so now with all of this done, I'm going to run this and I'll come back in just a second to see what the results are. As you can see, it started creating here all of its to-do lists. So it's going to first of all examine the current CLI structure to understand the code base better and know what to actually give to the sub agents. Now, as you can see, it started the Tailwind CSS core engineer to implement the CLI subcommands. So the first task that it's going to do is implement the CLI subcommands and go ahead and implement all of the things needed for that. After restructuring the CLI to support the subcommands, so both of these, it's going to implement the count classes subcommand with the class counting functionality, and then test the CLI structure with the robot project, and only after that, it will add the count classes tool to the MCP server. Now, while this is doing its thing, let's actually hop back into this thing here, and I want to take a look at how these files actually look like. So we can say here agents, and then we have the MCP protocol expert and the Tailwind CSS core engineer. If we see this, we have the name, we have the description, all of these things are editable. This is a markdown file. The cool thing is that we can use Claude to generate all of these things, and then we can come here and slowly start adjusting this as we see that the agents have certain mistakes that they do, or we want to like slightly adjust here the like this prompt. Okay, so this gives it also examples. And then we have here commentary. So this is like the structure of like this thing here. So it says context user is implementing an MCP server. Okay, so this gives it basically like examples on how to invoke this. And then also some commentary like this requires deep understanding of MCP transport mechanisms and message flow. We also have here the caller. And then we have the prompt itself. So it says here that you are an expert software engineer specializing in all of these things. Okay, so the approach is when answering questions, you should always reference the official MCP specification as the authoritative source. This is great. You proactively use context retrieval or web search to access the latest MCP specification. So see, for example, here it says context retrieval. It maybe didn't understand the fact that we meant context 7. So we can change this. You provide code examples using the official MCP Python SDK, perfect. And you explain protocol concepts with precise technical accuracy. All of these things are great. Quality standards when providing solutions, start with a clear explanation, include Python SDK code examples, highlight common pitfalls, and reference these to suggest testing strategies for MCP implementations. So all of this looks great. We could maybe even like change this for it to be a bit more like implementative, to implement things more than what it's saying here. And the Tailwind CSS, same thing. Contact the user wants to add a new utility class to Tailwind CSS. User, I need to add a new text grading, all of this stuff. So this is an example again. So I think that these examples like help so I think that these examples are for us to know exactly what's happening here, and these prompts then are for the to pass this into the LLM itself. So let's hop back actually into here this. And if you continue taking a look at these things, we see here like the configuration, the file format, and I want to see, okay, natural language description of the sub agent's purpose. Okay, yeah, so this is like a basically description. I want to search here to see like the description, what it does. So actually, yes, this is not a description for us. This is actually a description for the LLM to know when to invoke this. So if we take a look at this, use this agent when you need to implement new features, fix bugs, or modify the Tailwind CSS V for code base. This includes working with TypeScript APIs, Rust Oxide engine. So this is the name of the engine itself. Implementing new utilities. This is very cool because it maybe analyze like a little bit the code base, or it already knows that this is the name of the engine. Implementing new utilities, modifying CSS generation logic, or understanding the internal architecture of the Lean CSS. The agent has deep knowledge of both the user-facing APIs and the internal implementation details. And then we have here examples. And these examples, like I said, I made a mistake. So I said that this was for us, but actually these examples are to give like the LLM context. The user wants to add a new utility. Um, then we have here the user is debugging an issue with CSS generation. Um, the user wants to understand how the Rust Oxide engine interfaces with TypeScript. So it gives here a bunch of different examples of when we could use this. So as you can see, this is very cool. I'm going to hop back here into the project and continue seeing. So this is, let's also test the JSON output. Let's try this with a class that actually exists. Exactly, the CLI work is working perfectly. Let me mark this as test and move on to the next one. So now we have this command here. So I'm going to try to just scroll up here and then hop back into this. And let's try to run this command here to see how this is working. So we have here building CSS, and then this is the path to the thing. So yeah, I think this is all correct. So now let's run this. And as you can see, we have here the context of the location where it found it. And then we have here the line and the column. And yeah, okay, so these are the locations where it found um, like this class. So for example, text sm, we have the total occurrences 3, file count 1, is valid class is true. So okay, this is like a very nice addition that I obviously didn't even think about, which is this class even valid or not? So we can like try to see which invalid classes are occurring inside of the system using an agent. So we can tell the agent, okay, I want you to use the MCP server, like the TDub lint MCP server, to look at this Tailwind CSS project and tell me, first of all, find the classes that are like not valid, and then you can use this to just see where inside of the files that is, and you don't even need to like have the LLM like scatter manually through all of the things. So we are building this like this tooling around the LLM. And if you want to take a look at my previous video, I also went over the tooling side of building with AI coding agents. I'm going to leave a link in the description below, and also a link somewhere, because I'm not really sure about these YouTube thing, to be honest, where this is going to pop up somewhere up here. But in that video, I've explained how tooling is like a cycle where we build tools for the LLM and for AI, and then we actually make its job easier for these tools to make like things easier for them. And then we can also use these tools to build better tooling. So this is a perfect example of me using Claude Code to build something that will help Claude Code itself in other projects. So I've just spent here, I don't know how much time this took, like 10 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, while I was like yapping here and show you things. And essentially, I've created something that is going to allow me to make the LLM's job even easier by now looking at the invalid classes and then saying, okay, now I want to take these classes one by one and call this endpoint, this MCP server endpoint, and it added this here. I'm going to test this in just a second after I finish my thought, but basically like now I can say to it, okay, use this, and then it can take like this context of the locations, the line and the column, and just like jump there straight away, not pollute the context and very much by like searching for things. So this is just awesome. Okay, so with all of this done, now we know that the CLI works correctly. So let's try to test this MCP server. So I'm going to start this with this npx command and then run here uv run. Again, if you want to take a look at this, I'm going to leave a link in the description down below for you to see exactly how this works. I'm going to copy this and then paste this into the browser to run the MCP inspector and try to connect to this MCP server from an MCP client and test our new tool call. After pasting this inside here, the browser, I can connect to it, list the tools, and let's see if this count classes works correctly. So I have this already here prepared. So we want to run this first of all here. Then the class name is going to be this one, and the files will be the following. Okay, so we want to pass here the files with the glog, and then we want to run the tool. And if we take a look at this, it says here the invalid classes. So this seems actually to be the incorrect response. And by taking a look at this, I can most likely tell that this is actually the response that should be sent from the check directory or check file. So there has to be some kind of problem. So let's hop back into the terminal and we can say here that we have this and say this is the response that the count classes tool call is giving to me. So I want you to task the MCP expert with adding the correct CLI or with using the correct CLI subcommand and arguments to return the correct thing. Currently, it's returning the data that we would get when running the node invalid classes CLI and not the count classes one. So now it's going to give this to the sub agent. I'm going to wait a little bit for it to try to fix it, and then we'll try to use the MCP server again and see if this is working correctly. Okay, so now it just completed doing all of the fixes, and then it says that it wanted to also run some kind of validation tests. So we'll skip this. We'll instead stop the server. And like I said, this is gave all of these tasks to the MCP protocol expert, and as you can see, all of these 26,000 tokens were only used by the sub agent and not given to this primary agent. So this helps us organize our context in a much nicer way. I'm going to copy this new URL with the token, and then inside the browser, I'm going to connect to this and list the tools. Now let's try to run these count classes again. So I want to pass here, first of all, this, then the class name, which is this one. And finally, let's try to pass here the files and run this tool again. So I'm going to click here, and then as you can see, now it has the correct response here. We see two total occurrences. I've changed the file to actually have two different occurrences. Then it's not a valid class. It's cool again because it integrated this with the other functionality, and it gives us here the two locations. So now if I give this to an LLM, it knows that, okay, it's in the line 15 and in line 5, and the column is 132. So now I'm going to integrate this with the Claude Code inside of the other project, and then we can take a look and see exactly how this works and how we can actually make the LLM fix things with this MCP server. So we basically want to add this MCP server by running this exact same thing, but inside of the Claude command. So inside of the robot project here, I'm going to say here Claude MCP add twlint, and we will pass here uv run and then the full path. So actually I need to say here code and then pass this here. So this is the exact same one, just to check. And now if I say here Claude, and again, I'm not really sure how to type this, I'm going to just copy it and then say here Claude, and then say this to not have to accept each one of the permissions. And now I'm going to tell it here we're inside a Next.js project. I want you to use the twlint MCP server to look for the invalid classes, see where they occur by using the count class tool call, and remove them. Okay, so we could actually be less like specific than this, but let's try to run this and see how it works. So now it says that it'll help us find and remove. So first of all, it's going to scan for invalid Tailwind CSS classes. First, I need to find the CSS file and then scan the project files. So it's going to find the globals. And now it's going to call here the check directory. So it's going to pass all of these things here. Total candidates 65. And then I found one. So then it's going to count the classes, total occurrences. And now it found two occurrences of the invalid classes. And now it's going to remove them from the files. So in this case, it's actually going to read the entire file. So the idea would be that it would be a little bit more like efficient with its changes. But yeah, so now let me verify the changes were applied correctly. So now we have the total candidates 63. And perfect, all the invalid classes have been removed. Like I said, I have a video about this, about how AI and tooling helps us create like this cycle. This was mostly like focused on the agents and how agents can allow us to build new features and debug new features like in real time. I showed you how I was building this. I know this was a little bit longer than the other ones, but it's cool because I'm showing you here exactly how to build things step by step, and you can see how to actually use these tools to build something that is useful, not only to toy applications, and how to actually like create good constraints and how to build, which is like I'm repeating myself, but this is the truth, that the tooling is one of the most important things. So if I didn't have, for example, this thing of finding invalid Tailwind CSS classes, then the LLM would just ramble around the code base and maybe say, okay, this is invalid because it's not, it has a dot or something like that, or the rounded needs to have LG, something like that. Pretty random stuff sometimes, to be honest. But instead of that, we can create tools that allow the LLM to interact with things, to provide the correct context to the LLMs. And yeah, these kinds of agents allow us to like structure things in a much nicer way. And then if we have these proper tools, then things become much easier. So I hope this video was helpful to you and it taught you new stuff about how to use Claude Code, and I'll see you on the next one.